Welcome back, mere mortals out there. Today, we're not going to go to sleep. We're going to be talking about sleeping. Just want to call out that this is episode 151. We've just gone over the 150 mark. That came quick.
Yep.
And obviously that is not counting all of the other various shows that we do. So we're probably all up well over 300. But definitely in these particular ones, 151. So today we're going to be talking about sleeping, mere mortals out there. So for me, I want to get into the various levels of sleeping.
Yeah.
And the actual definition of sleeping in the science and the anatomy of it as well.
Okay, good.
Good. A little bit of polyphasic sleep. I know probably something that most people know, but just kind of dive into it, see if you've got any experiences with it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
Sounds good. I'm going to be talking about some personal sleeping things. Mm-hmm. Just some, I would say, striking facts that I came up with, and a couple of hypotheticals, I think, to end off with. Something
all right.
A little interesting.
Okay. Well, first of all, definition.
Yeah. Right,
Have you got one for me?
I'll go with mine. So, suspension of voluntary bodily functions and suspension of consciousness.
Oh.
And I think that's suspension was split into whether it was like full or a partial.
Right. Okay. That's interesting. I didn't come across that.
Okay.
Mine was more the being asleep, naturally recurring state of mind and body characterized by altered consciousness. So it was more the altered consciousness, but not the stopping of consciousness.
Yeah, no, but altered consciousness, you can get that from anything though.
That's why. That's why I was
alcohol,
like looking at
drugs.
So that
meditation.
was the first Google, first definition that I got. That was that, and then I went, that's not good enough.
Agreed.
Because for me, I thought to define sleep properly seems interesting. When you really think about it, what is sleep? Is it when you close your eyes and like what's the actual boundary that it goes into? Okay, now you're sleeping, and when does it actually stop? Like, do you count maybe those micro wake ups that you do during the night? Like, you're still sleeping? Are you not? So that's why I guess I delved down into the anatomy and the science and everything to kind of go, okay, well, this is what I would call definitely sleep.
Yeah.
But I do agree with yours where it seems simple, where it's kind of like the end of consciousness. It's where the consciousness stops.
But also the voluntary bodily functions. So you can't voluntarily move stuff. I mean, that's really linked with consciousness, but that was right up there as well. So
but what if you have involuntary bodily functions just because you have some sort of injury or issue?
Voluntary.
The end of voluntary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Suspension of voluntary bodily functions. Okay. Involuntary is not voluntary. So
sure, but you can have involuntary while you're awake.
Yeah, but that's not what this is saying. This is saying suspension of voluntary. This is not saying when you're awake that there's no involuntary stuff. I mean, that's...
Gotcha, good. Everything. Okay, all right. So I've got a little bit of the science behind it, because I don't know how deep you went into the science behind it.
I looked, and it's pretty intriguing, but I wouldn't personally bother going too deep into it myself.
Too deep into it.
So I didn't.
No. So
I figured you'd be, so I was like, I'll leave it up to one.
I'm gonna read this, not verbatim, because there's obviously a lot of stuff that I took down on notes, but I was interested with the anatomy in diving down into what is the actual definition of sleep? So,
educate me, please.
The levels of sleep, what happens? So, first of all, the hypothalamus, that little thing that has long-term memory. They describe it as peanut-sized structure deep inside the brain. So, basically, there's some nerves in there, which in there is called the SCN. It's got a longer name, but I just abbreviated it. It's got an abbreviation.
That's fine.
Whatever. Now, from that, the actual brainstem, it communicates with the hypothalamus and the SCN. So then does some funky stuff, sends some things. Then the thalamus relays some information through to your pineal gland and the SCN. Then your actual basal forebrain near the front of the brain starts promoting the sleep. So that front section of your brain works through the promotes sleeping and wakefulness. So that's through things like melatonin and the like. And then the amygdala. I didn't actually know this. The amygdala. So that's the almond-shaped structure involved in processing emotions. So normally, you talk about amygdala hijack and that. Mm-hmm. It's also obviously involved with your sleeping. It becomes increasingly active during your REM sleep. So that's where the amygdala comes into play, which is interesting because obviously it brings into emotions. But what I kind of noticed from all of that anatomy, which there's a lot of there, is for me it'd be the point where your hypothalamus through the SCN connects through to your brainstem and you start getting that release of your chemicals. Now that could be melanin, and a few others to actually get you to sleep. Once that process begins,
Yeah.
then I'd say, okay, you're sleeping unless you hijack it, unless you do something. And so my question I was going to ask you was, okay, so that's a little bit of the anatomy, and there's the levels of sleeping, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But question for you.
Yes.
If you lucid dream,
Yeah.
are you sleeping?
Yes.
Okay. Do you think there, though, that you're conscious or unconscious
No, you're
in that
definitely.
state?
You're conscious.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh, so with your definition where it's you sort
It's
of...
both. It's both.
Ooh,
Suspension
okay, so-
of voluntary bodily functions and suspension of consciousness.
So
Like-
suspension of consciousness,
So it doesn't.
but you're conscious.
Partial or.
Right, okay. So you'd say that it's partial consciousness at that point.
I suppose so. Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's hard to say because like when I did have that lucid dream, geez, when was it? A year and a bit ago.
Yeah,
Back
a while
in
ago.
the mum studio. Thank you, mum. That was it was definitely I was definitely conscious, but waking up from it, I would also say, okay, yeah, it probably wasn't as full, like the full deal. And I suppose it couldn't be because my brain's doing all sorts of weird shit when I'm sleeping. Like you just explained all the weird stuff that's different. So even if I'm conscious in it, the physical stuff that's going on in there is different. So it's probably not as full conscious. And I'd say that was sort of what it felt like as well.
Gotcha, okay.
And it depends. Yeah, I mean, I don't know enough about consciousness. Do people consider it an on and off switch? Is it more of a gradual scale? Is it some sort of sphere that you look at pinpoint? I don't know.
I don't know either. But anyways, that was my little anatomy.
Yeah.
Like,
What about you? If you're lucid dreaming, are you sleeping? Do you consider that sleeping?
I do consider it sleeping. Yes.
Because it's your body. Your body's not doing anything.
But then what about, because I've experienced this, where it's not, I wouldn't call this lucid dreaming, where, say it's 11 p.m. and you wake up, but your brain is still in that state, let's just call it in the level 3 of REM sleep. So it's either deep or in that REM sleep stage.
Yeah.
But you've managed to open your eyes. Now your brain's still going haywire, right? Your amygdala is responding, you've got emotions going everywhere, so you start hallucinating basically. But your eyes are open, so you're starting to see it almost in the real world, but it's like augmented reality. That's a bit of an interesting one because your brain, I wouldn't say theoretically that it's awake, but you're also sort of conscious in your real world of what's happening. There, I'm a little bit like, I don't know if I call that sleeping. I'd call it like you're awake, but experiencing the experience of what it'd be like to be sleeping.
Yeah.
So that'd be my own thing. That's the only time I've experienced. I've never. Hard to say never, but I'd say maybe I've lucid dreamed once or twice, and maybe for like a few seconds. It wasn't for very long.
Like a huge thing. Yeah. I mean, sleeping's a pretty easy one. It's one of those words you don't really need to butcher and change, So it's if there's any ethical arguments or whatever about, are you sleeping when you're in that sort of condition? It's like, well, who cares? Maybe let's just use a different word for it. How often does that sort of shit come up?
Oh, yeah.
Sort of pointless. What about other body related stuff? Did you find anything about that? Like what your heart's doing? Did you look into that sort of things?
No. The only thing I looked into was purely the brain. Okay. More so the brain, because I was interested more. Like I just had no idea what steps were actually happening apart from the chemicals that got released.
Yeah.
What parts of your brain were trying to talk to each other, say like, oh, okay, cool, it's time for bed, let's go and do this.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, this gets onto something. So why do we sleep? And it's a pretty fun one to look at because it's such a weird thing. A third of your life you spend sleeping, and
a lot of time.
It's obviously it feels good after getting a good night's sleep, but evolutionarily you'd think, man, what an opportunity for if some
extra efficiencies.
If some organism can get by without any sleep, you would just assume that they would grow to dominate the planet just by the fact of being able to do shit all the time. So looking it up, it still seems like it's like a bit of a iffy one in terms of why exactly we do. It's sort of like running, why exactly can we run quite long distances but are really short ones? Why did we even get up on 2 legs in the first place? It's one of those questions where you can come up with like a bunch of really good answers for evolutionarily why. And this is why I'm sort of skeptical sometimes when I hear of people saying, explaining something evolutionary and you're like, oh yeah, that sort of makes sense. So the classic one for me is that our ancestors were, it was the ones who took risks. Like if they were frightened by a snake and it actually wasn't a snake, that was a good thing because, on the 1 in 1 million chance it is a snake, you've just saved your life. And so doing it, 999,000 whatever times, that's like the cost is so small that it doesn't even matter. But I was sort of thinking like, wait, I can explain this just as easily the other way. You're out on a hunt with your friends trying to catch a lion, and you're just the like bitch of the group. You are getting scared at every little rustling leaf. You're basically the man-chill of your group, and you're just scared. You're just scared all the time. Surely your group at some point would be like, we don't want you in our group anymore. Like we can't hunt lions because you're being a bitch all the time. So I reckon I could come up with just a good explanation for why that strategy is a bad thing, evolutionarily speaking. So just one of those things. So this is one of those topics where it's like that. If you find someone saying online why you sleep, there's probably like just as
there's a good conversation to have there.
There's probably 10 other arguments that are just as good. And but I think you hit on something really good where you were talking about the brain, and sort of in my own research, it was saying that like the most consistent impacts in animals are in the brain. So it's not a body thing. So it's not as if we sleep because our muscles are tired and that's when they need to regenerate. We don't sleep because we need to, it's like an engine. You need to let it rest for a bit and cool out before you turn it back on and reuse it. It's not really like that. It's more all the shit that's going on in the brain. And it's key for reorganization, so plasticity. So basically if you're sleeping, you want your brain to be, I don't know, in a good state. Like your body can be all mangled, messed up in a weird position, whatnot. Getting like you're sleeping with your hands above your head. And, there's people who are vampires and shit who sleep in coffins. Like there's a guy who hasn't sat down for 30 something years, most of his life.
What?
Yeah, there's a dude out there. Man, there's always people like this out there.
Why are you
surprised?
He's been laying down all the time.
No. So he doesn't lay down. So he's always standing. Or sitting.
What? Did you say he doesn't sit?
Yeah, he doesn't sit. I'm pretty sure he just stands the whole time.
Okay.
And there's definitely some dudes in India. They used to be called. What was it? It was in this book.
It's called
It was like the yummy. It was like the Yummy Barbers or something like that. It was a very, very Indian sounding name. And it was basically guys like, as aesthetics who take a vow to never sit again.
Gotcha.
For,
okay.
For Vishnu or whatever.
Yep.
And they'll also, or like there's a guy who's...
I have seen the one with the hand above
the head. Similar sort of thing. So, even them, when they're sleeping, they're probably doing not as bad damage, like because the brain is that's why we're sleeping.
Yeah,
so
right. Okay.
Even though they're sleeping, standing upright, first of all, you're a dumbass person who's doing that. It's probably not as bad. Like it's sort of okay.
It's doable.
Yeah.
But I mean, a couple of things. Think about what's the reason for sleeping, and I know one is, and again, the science behind it. Go look it up yourself. But your short-term to long-term memory generally happens when you're sleeping, more so than when you're
like
awake.
Consolidating it.
So the actual transfer from wherever the prefrontal cortex and wherever you actually store the short-term memory to your hypothalamus, that happens during sleeping. Yeah. It does happen when you're awake, but during sleeping, it's sort of promoted to do that.
Yeah.
Two, you release when you're, say, for us, if we're training, if we're working out, it's generally time where you actually recover the most when you're sleeping. And it's not so much, I always thought it was because you were sleeping, so we just like relaxed, and so your body would relax. But it's more because you release your HGH, so your human growth hormone, like your natural one, and a lot of other things while you're sleeping. That's the time when that is released. So having better sleep leads to better growth / recovery because you've got all those chemicals flowing through you and doing that in a more natural way. But just purely, I mean, just having the ability to relax your muscles as well, because you'll, like you were saying with the involuntary, your muscles during REM and sleep you sort of almost like let go. And when you have like that twitching, so when you sort of start sleeping, that's almost like those stresses in your muscles starting to let go all the electricity on it. It's kind of like beeping and flowing. And when you're fully sleeping, it's just all completely relaxed. You'd almost be like, if they dropped you off a 10-story building or something and you were completely asleep, you'd just be like ragdoll, which is good, which is you need that for almost your joints to restore themselves and everything like that. So, but yeah, that's an interesting point. Like, why do we sleep? Where it actually came from? Is it interesting? Because imagine if you're a caveman or something and you just like, no one's telling you, you just got to be like, oh, I seem to have to like lie down and close my eyes at some point. But what happens, the interesting, I've always thought about doing this experiment because I always read about, I don't know if you read about that, the famous Russian sleeping experiment. Have you heard about this?
Maybe.
It's a couple of videos about it, and I'll get all the details wrong. But in essence, it boils down to some scientists experiments that are putting people for 9 days without sleeping, and they started going crazier and crazier and crazier, and then up to the 8th or the 9th day, they're like, oh, there's no noise coming from there, and they went into the room and they found that people started eating each other, and then they started eating the scientists and all this. What the fuck? It was one of those creepypasta sort of things, right?
Yeah.
But it's totally, I was always thought of the experiment like, oh, what happens if you like don't sleep for 4 days? Like what would happen? But the full thing is, I mean, reading a lot of the thing about it is, you start hallucinating.
Yeah.
For sure, that's one thing. And I don't know whether that's because your amygdala is like crying out to get some restorative purposes and you start just like seeing things or your brain just going haywire. But I connect that more to if you weren't to sleep for like say 3 days, what's the one thing that's really affected? Like sure, your heartbeat probably starts to beat a little bit faster. Your heart rate variability may be lower. You might find that other aspects of your sort of chemical imbalances are there. But I reckon the biggest one would be something like from a brain. Like you just be like mental fog, can't do anything. Like your brain's just crying out. You can't remember anything because you're not storing it properly.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'll skip to this part here. So a couple of facts. So longest without sleep. What do you think it actually is that has been measured?
Measured, I'd say 89 hours.
89 hours. You are incorrect, sir.
Ooh.
264 hours, 11 days.
Dang, 11 days. That's a lot, man. That is a lot of days.
So that was one of the, just back in the day when people, first of all, Guinness World Records was accepting, longest time without sleep. And then when the science sort of started catching up and saying,
don't do that.
Hey, this is so bad.
Please don't do this.
That was one of the ones they crossed off. I'm sure there's other things that they've crossed off their list that are super dangerous that, back in the day used to. So yeah, longest without sleep, 264 hours. What they were saying with him was paranoia, like you mentioned, the hallucinations. I think it was like elevated heart rate. He was unable to complete simple mathematical equations, 10 times 15 or something.
Yep.
And he basically was just, I guess you'd call it a zombie-like. I'm not sure another way of describing it really well, where it was just, he was so messed up that he was basically not human anymore.
Yep.
And how long did he sleep after that? Only 14 hours.
Wow. I want to hear the next bit. Like, was he fully recovered?
Yeah. What happened?
Like, was he like totally fine after that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Question: personal experience. What was the longest time you went without sleep?
Longest, it wouldn't be too far beyond 24 hours, maybe 30, like 30, 32, something around that. Apparently the most tired you get is after 30 hours. That's sort of the consistent.
Yeah, okay.
That's where you really hit the wall and you're basically at your worst.
I do recall, so I don't know what time I woke up on a Thursday. Maybe like 5:30 a.m. back in the days. It was a long time ago. I went to work. We went out partying that night. I was probably got back home at 4 a.m. or something, and I had work the next day, so I thought, just keep going through. So I just kept went to work. Then we went out that night again, and I didn't get home till Saturday, like 6 something a.m. And I thought, I'll go to sleep. And that same day, I think I slept the most I'd ever slept. So I just slept like all the way through like Sunday morning, and I was like, what a waste of a whole weekend. And then I was like wrecked too from all the parties. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, well, you'll have to do well to beat Wyatt Shaw, who has also the longest record of sleep, 11 days. Apparently, he was...
in a row?
Yep. He was just this kid. He went to bed as normal, and he is in Kentucky, of all places.
Was he in a coma?
And
I feel like that's like described as a coma.
Yeah, there's just what Wikipedia says, man. I'm not going to fight it.
Mate... This is misinformation at its finest.
Actually, no, I went on to another site as well, so it wasn't just Wikipedia.
Okay.
And I think they just described it as to wake him up, they needed, it's sort of like a coma, but he was, I think, displaying all the sort of symptoms of what you'd expect someone who was sleeping.
Wow.
But he just wasn't waking up. So they used the anti-schizophrenic, or it was like anti-schizophrenic, or the drugs that they use to get people out of comas to essentially force them to wake up. And when he did, he was not well, man. He had brain problems and whatnot.
He must have had the wildest dream. Mate, can you imagine
It was
that? Maybe
dream,
he was lucid dreaming and never wanted to get out.
That
Like he was like, oh my God,
the
I'm
place
11
that-
days of like the dream.
He's
This
got
is
his
heaven.
harem, he's got his everything that
Mate, but anyways, Wyatt, poor dude, obviously.
Kudos to him, man. That's
Too much sleeping.
Good effort.
That's the negative side of too much sleeping. Holy shit.
What about have you heard of adenosine?
Adenosine.
Yeah. So that's the neurochemical indicator of sleep debt. So
Sleep debt.
So
Yep.
that's essentially what you were talking about when you skip sleep, and then you're gonna have to try and catch it up.
Yep.
But it's one of those things I don't think you can never really catch it up, or it's not like, oh, I went 2 nights without sleep, so I'll just sleep 16 hours and I'll be fine. No.
I can confirm that yes.
That doesn't
so
work.
here's back in my previous life working as consulting.
Wow.
Because I can't say I would consult.
Some wild stories from that.
I would work like maybe the wildest week would have been like an 85-hour coming up to like 90-hour weeks, right? And working weeks.
Which let's just put a stop there. Like there's people who've done 110, 120.
Yeah, and like they've done way more, right? So, but even then I remember, but that wasn't like 7 days of working. That was 6 days of working.
Yeah.
So, but regardless, you're sleeping.
Top effort.
You're basically sleeping 4 or 5 hours every day for like the working week, and then on Saturday maybe a little bit more. And then Sunday comes, and you're like, that's it. I need to crash here. I need to make up for all my hours. And you might sleep 10 hours, but you're still just absolutely gutted. And the interesting thing is there's some percentage of people out there. What percentage is? 1%, 2%, 3%? Who knows? But they can get by with very little sleep. Because that was the other one I was looking into, was how much sleep do you actually need?
Yeah.
Like what do you actually need? And this has always been of real interest to me. Because when you're young, babies, it can be like 16 hours. 16 or 18 hours. You kind of need that.
Yeah, you see the sort of graph of 0 to 3 months, 16, like 17 hours, 15 to 17. I think after a year, it started to get to like 14 hours, 13. And then,
And it basically goes like it tails down. So as you get older, you slowly need less and less. What the reason behind it? I mean, it could be because you're developing and there's so much growth and processing that you need that rest time to be able to do that. Whatever. Who knows? There's probably someone out there who knows and there's information, but I didn't look it up, so I'm not going to misinform you.
Sorry,
but the interesting one that I found was, okay, what about like middle age? What if you're like 20 years old to 50 years old? What do you actually need? Because there's some people out there.
20 years old, middle age now.
Well, I'm talking the middle of life. Like I'm saying 0 to 20 years old.
Yeah, okay.
Is one period, 20 to 50, and then 50 to like whatever.
Okay.
Now, if you're talking about what do you need for sleep, I've always been in the case of saying, okay, for me personally, the golden, like the really perfect dialed in day of sleeping would be 6.5 hours to 7. Mm-hmm. So if I'm in that range of 6.5 to 7, it's really good, but it goes further beyond. So a little bit of extra level. So if I could get 6.5 hours to 7 hours and it's more than 1 hour of deep sleep and more than 2 hours of REM sleep, then it's like a fantastic sleep. Like it is amazing. And a comparison of what I would love to get to is in Dave Asprey's book. Now, this is obviously him sharing what his statistics is. Whether he does it every night or not, I'm not sure. And he takes like ungodly amount of supplements to do this and go through so many things. So I don't know if it's even like physically possible for me to get to this. But he sleeps about 6 hours and gets 2 hours of deep sleep and 2.5 hours of REM sleep each time, which is like, preposterous, like so much. And I couldn't really nail down. And if someone actually knows about this, like scientifically, how much REM sleep and deep sleep you need, because I researched like a long time to try to find this and I could not find it. You can find rough times of what you need to sleep, but nowhere where it's like you need this much REM sleep and deep sleep. Maybe because it's too personalized. And that's where it kind of gets me back to my original point. Because I've met some people who, for them, they just live on 4.5 hours, 5 hours sleep. And it's okay. Like their body can get on with that. And probably they are getting better REM sleep and deep sleep for that recovery purpose.
When you say though, it's okay though, is it sort of like that's the best for them? As in if they got 8 hours, would they be doing better, but only just marginally better?
Well, it almost felt
or
like
it's actually better for them to be.
obviously it's not backed with any like real data.
Yeah, no,
but
that's
for
just
them it was
anecdotal. Yeah.
whether they slept 5 hours or 8 hours, there didn't seem to be any benefit.
Yeah, okay.
It was almost like a detriment, and I can get that because for me, if I go above 8 hours, so it's like too much. Like I've gone overboard and I feel tired. I feel a bit wrecked. Yeah, it's better to have like that structured time. And I found it's like 6.5 hours to 7. If I do that, golden. Anything a little bit beyond, a little bit too, or overslept, you can get that. But anything below 6 hours or 6.5 hours, it's starting to get, for a couple of days, it's like, okay, no, you're not performing optimally. But I'd love to get some more deep statistics on that.
Did you read anything about oversleeping? Is it an actual phenomenon or is it just
I didn't actually, I didn't research much into it.
Yeah, I didn't have.
But I mean, anecdotally, I felt it a lot. I don't know. Do you find that oversleeping takes away from your day?
No, not. I mean, not in the sense of that your sort of tend is like I've got so much to do. I need those extra hours.
Yep.
For me, if those extra hours go, that's fine. I don't think so. Like if I slept 9.5 hours, or 10 hours, I don't think I'd feel that worse. Yeah. Well, although actually now that you mention it, like there are times where I'll wake up and I'll sort of just be like, no, I'm going to like force myself to go back because I'm just feeling really extra lazy this day or whatever. And yeah, maybe those days I do. Yeah, it's just not helpful, I guess. So yeah, I'd say it's probably not helpful.
Yep.
Doing that.
Yeah, I'd say finding a good little ratio for yourself is good.
Yeah, the only thing I know on this was just a stat I read, which was saying when you're in sort of like elderly age, so I think this was sort of 60 plus, around that. If you get less than 7 hours sleep a night, your all-inclusive mortality, whatever it is, rate goes up slightly, I think by 6%. If you get more than 9 hours, I believe, like more than 9 or 10 hours, so there's like going well beyond, that's when it jumps up to like 30%, and you have way higher risks of developing cancer and heart attacks as well. So there's obviously something in the elderly, at least, about sleeping way longer, which is sort of a bad, like is it the sleeping that's bad for them, or is something bad happening to them so they need more sleep
like is there something
recover?
else? Yeah, okay.
Who knows? So that was I suppose, anecdotal one. I can just say that most the people that I know who are in that age, they tend to sleep less. They just they have lower energy throughout the day, and it's almost like that's just been taken away from them from like those extra hours. So it's just added an extra 3 hours onto their day, but it's taken 25% of their energy, their just baseline energy, and said like, here, this is what I'm replacing this with.
Yeah,
so,
okay.
Something like that.
I was going to ask you about this, and it kind of suits in with more the polyphasic sleep stuff. So I was going to ask you, well, what about napping?
Napping, yeah.
Would you consider napping something like polyphasic sleep? So if you were to do it right, because basically, to those out, it's called the Uberman sleeping cycle, I think it was called. I think it was.
It was something like that.
I think I actually noted it down. Let me just see. It is called I think it's Uberman. Yes, Uberman schedule. So where you would sleep basically every 20 minutes or 40 minutes, something like that. So you do like little micro naps or every 2 hours?
No, so it was you'd sleep 20
minutes every 2 hours.
Was it 2 hours? No, that sounds too often. I think it was every 4 hours.
Okay. So yes, you are correct. 20-minute naps every 4 hours.
Yeah.
But the study behind it, I remember looking at it, like the dumb thing about that. So, I mean, the premise is that if you do 20-minute naps every 4 hours.
So that's 2 hours sleep in a total day?
Yes. Yep. And if you do that across a whole day continuously, then that's enough of a sleep to recover and then obviously have the most efficient amount of time to go and do whatever.
Yeah, as in every single one of those is REM sleep. And so you're getting your REM quota.
That you need. So maybe that suits the whole. You need 2 hours worth of REM sleep, I guess. Yeah. But yeah, regardless, I mean, you can already think about what the troubles of that is. One, you basically have no social life because imagine, you're out of the club, 2 a.m. and you're like, oh, dang, I'm going to get to sleep. Straight up, 20-minute nap. But it's going to be like not let's just like lay down. No, you got to be like
it's gotta be a proper sleep,
sleeping. So yeah, that would just suck for that. And I think to the person who was doing it as well as reading, for them to do it, they had to get someone else to help them out to train them to be able to do this 20-minute nap. So it wasn't even by alarm, because they don't suggest for you to use alarms in this schedule, which is just crazy. It's like someone should come and wake you up so that it's like a natural waking up. And I thought, man, this is way too much effort for sure, you might get 20% extra of your life.
Yeah.
But I feel like the effort of that, you probably take away 50% of life in terms of interactions with humans, effort that you're putting into just setting that into place, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. It depends on what kind of lifestyle you want. I could see it working.
Would you introduce this? So I think people like Jocko Willink does this because that's how he sleeps so little, right? He has like 1 or 2 naps through the day and then has like a shorter sleep. Would you consider doing something like sleeping 4 hours, half-hour nap in the mid-morning, half an hour nap in the mid-afternoon, if you could get to that 4 hours sleep?
I'd only do it in a culture where that's what everyone does.
Yeah, so like a Spain
sort of
style.
Argentina in was it Mendoza? No, it's a town called San Juan, which is north of Mendoza, and it was crazy, man. I went there. I went out to this park, and just everyone was at this park at 3 a.m. on a Thursday. 3 p.m. or 2 p.m., 3 p.m. on a Thursday. I just went, does no one work here? Like, what is going on? And then I figured out later when I went another day at that same time to try and buy something, everything was closed because they do the siesta. So I'd potentially do it in a thing like that, but in Australia, no way.
Yeah, okay. So I would never do that.
Yeah.
And
why?
So it's anecdotal. I suck at napping.
Yeah.
Suck at napping. So even if you got into the conversation with me about it, like, is napping good and bad? I'm going to tell you it's bad, just anecdotally. But I, like, personally, when I nap, like, if I'm really wrecked and I go, no, you have to nap. Like, your body needs it. The benefit that I'm getting from the napping is completely taken away by how horrible I feel afterwards. Like, I just feel hot and bothered. Like, the tiredness doesn't go away.
Yeah, I don't feel refreshed.
There is no, when people are like, oh yeah, you can have like a 20-minute nap or a 30-minute nap, and they suggest, put your legs above your heart so that when you wake up, you feel fresh and regenerate. No, doesn't happen. That does not work for me.
Yeah.
If it works for you, awesome. I'm glad it does for you because I ain't napping.
Never heard of the legs above the heart.
Oh, haven't you? Yeah. So they do suggest that as well.
Well, we're talking about personal stuff. So here's a couple of things. So one, the worst I've ever been mentally was in a phase of my life when I was on night shift or switching very rapidly between day shift and night shift. So this was in Kestrel in 2012, 2013. And yeah, I would do like a roster of 3 days on, 4 days off, 4 nights on, like 3 days off, 3 days on, 4. Like, it was just absolutely terrible. So switching very, very frequently between night shifts, day shifts, and then like you'd have a pajama day as well, and some bits. Or there was also, I think there was also a roster for a 6-week period there where I did like 4 day shifts, three night shifts, and you'd have like this pajama day in the middle, and then you'd do like 4 night shifts, 3 day shifts, 7 days off, whatever. So yeah, just lots of rapid switching. Man, that was easily the most like depressed I've been, the worst I've ever felt about myself. Like the most negative thoughts, the laziest, the most unfit, the most unhealthy, all of that.
All combined.
All combined. So, some of that wasn't caused by it. I was alone and in a
dark areas, no sun.
Yeah. And I was, in Emerald, just sort of on my own, really. There was another guy there, but he was doing a different roster, so I'd barely see him. So there's definitely a bunch of things coming together, but take that as you will. And there's plenty, like if you want to do the research on FIFO and the amounts of like suicide and shit that goes on with those guys, it's terrible, man. Terrible.
Here's another
it's related to also as well to travel, to being away from your family and whatnot.
But it goes to show how important sleeping is. And one thing that I remember we've talked about it where I'd say like, oh, would you play around with your sleep? Like, let's try to sleep only 4 hours to see what it looks like. And you've been like, no.
Yeah.
I am not playing with my sleep.
Well, so when I was 14, 15, I heard of that Uber thing, and I was seriously thinking of trying it for a bit over a holiday sometime.
Yeah.
I never actually did, and I'm really glad I never attempted to. And one of the things it was saying in it as well was it takes time to get into it.
Yeah.
So you can't just
go straight into it.
You can't just be doing 20-minute naps every 4 hours. Try doing that right now. So you're actually going to have a period of
transition.
I think they said like five days to a week where you'll basically be getting no sleep because you just can't
really sleep properly. Yeah, no.
So
and that is too valid. Well, the other example I was going to say was, have you heard the banking 9 to 5? So this doesn't happen all the time. It's usually, I've heard it more in sort of the Asian culture. I have seen it sometimes play out in consulting, which is dumb. But the 9 to 5 culture is basically where you start work at 9 a.m. And I don't know, do you know how much investment banking kind of works and how they sort of work? Like what they do generally on a day-to-day? Because it's not too dissimilar to consulting.
Right.
So basically with when you're at the lower levels, no, there's no money playing, man. It's just all decks. It's all decks. It's all you do. So from 9 till 11, decks is in PowerPoints. So from 9 till 11 a.m. Okay. So from 9 till 11 a.m., what you'll basically do is you basically look at the news. Like, you're not really doing much because there's no real work until the partners, the more senior people go, hey, here's the work. We've got it from the client. We need this tonight.
Yeah.
So everyone just starts working. You get the coffees. Everyone's smashing down. You're making PowerPoints. This happens in consulting too. It's more in investment banking and even more in mergers and acquisitions.
Okay.
So you're building it all together. You got your review at 6 p.m. with a partner or something like that, where they go, okay, cool. Here's 2,000 fucking updates that I need you to do.
Yeah.
This needs to be done by tomorrow morning because we're presenting tomorrow morning. So that's when consultants, investment bankers roll up your sleeve, time to get to work. And usually
coffee enema.
Back in the day, they used to need to print these out as well, right? So they would there's particular companies like McKinsey and others where they have a whole completely separate team that you would send a semi-finalized presentation, and they would be the people who would like make it completely ready to go and print things out and have it perfectly. But anyways, so imagine at 7 p.m., 8 p.m., usually the partner's gone, but you'll have like a senior vice president or someone at a more senior, and you'll have a second checkup, 10 p.m., how it's going. And they'll go, nah, still needs changes. So then you like really rock and roll till about 2, 3 a.m. But in banking, they call it the 9 to 5 because you'll work all the way till 5 a.m., right? You'll take a taxi home, paid by the company after and you get paid like per diem, like you get paid your food, whatever you want. It's all paid by the company. You'll take your taxi home, 5 a.m. And usually, sometimes people will just sleep like an hour or two, wash, and then the same bloody taxi will take you back so you're ready to go for another 9 to 5. Damn. And what usually happens, which is always the most frustrating, and like I will never do this as much as I can, obviously, like on purpose. But what normally would happen is like you'd get back the next morning and you're like, man, I spent all night, like literally didn't even sleep to get this done. And the next morning, the partner will be like, oh yeah, now the client, no, we'll catch it up next week. It's fine. It's all good. Or they won't even look at the thing, or it won't even get used.
Yeah.
All for the lack of sleep. So,
good.
I mean, I've definitely learned through the consulting, do not disregard a good sleep. Thankfully for me, it's like, it's less than most people, but it isn't nothing. Like I still need sleep. Like for me to be able to operate effectively at 4:30 in the morning, if I see 11 o'clock on my phone, I start going, okay, I need to shift my alarm. Like it's not you can talk about it in the whole, like, oh, be disciplined to wake up at the same time each morning. Sure, do that. But if something happens and you can't go to sleep at the same time, then I'd say be more disciplined to get the right amount of sleep. Like make it happen. Like that is so important that you'll get wrecked without it. So,
For sure.
Actually, I'm gonna pull my mere mortal moment out as well because it fits right in. So it is, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Might sound cool, but you'll likely reach your mortal end quickly too.
Yep.
So
good.
Yeah. You wanna skip out on your sleep and you say, I'll sleep when I'm dead? Cool. You'll probably be dead quite soon too.
I'll see you when you're dead.
Yep.
I'll come to your funeral.
Exactly.
Motherfucker. Here's a couple other funny random ones. So I didn't know how bad I was sleeping while traveling in dorm rooms until I got back. And I think this can be a sneaky one. I think this can be a sneaky one of how small little changes to your bedroom or your sleeping pattern or whatnot can actually have sort of real big things overall. And yeah, after 14 months of being on the road, there was a 1 month period where I sort of had my own place, and so I got decent sleep then. But yeah, apart from that, it was, I think, adequate. Is how I'd say it. It wasn't good sleep. It was just adequate sleep. And I must have got used to people coming in, walking in, nothing, like coughing, all sorts of crap.
Yep.
And yeah, I didn't think anything was wrong until probably about a week or two after I came back. And I just went, man,
I'll be missing out on this.
Some good sleep, yeah. I actually knew an Aussie girl as well. Have you met many insomniacs?
No.
Okay.
No, not at all.
She was an insomniac, and one of the things she would do, which is totally plays into the backpacker stereotype, but every time she landed in somewhere, like the very first thing she would do is go out and try and find marijuana, because for her, she was basically an insomniac and she couldn't sleep well unless she had a joint right before bed.
Yeah,
so it's sort of like there's, I guess, getting into the medicinal type of stuff. And yeah, so she was like just a fiend. Every time she like lands in Mexico, first thing, like in the hostel, where can I get some weed? Where can I get a joint? Because
CBD is now legal here in Brisbane.
In Brisbane? Okay,
Yeah.
cool. No, I didn't know that. I was aware of it, like on the periphery. Very cool. Couple of questions for you, Juan. Actually, no, wait. One more fact. So, what's the most striking difference between cultures of different sleeping? What cultures would you expect to have the most different type of sleeping? Is it based on where they are, based on the weather, based on inventions they have, based on...
Well, I'd say culturally, so like siestas, and I'd say weather, like Eskimos.
Okay, yep. So it's actually those with and without artificial light. So those in the pre-light cultures, they actually tend to have more broken up sleep patterns. So they would sleep, like a nap here, a nap there. It wouldn't be just
one solid.
Yeah, sun goes down, we sleep, get back up at dawn. No, none of that. It would be all sorts of weird stuff. So yeah, I just thought, and man, I was just thinking the other day, man, light bulbs. God damn, this truly is what an invention, man. I had this real moment of clarity, just going, wow, how difficult would life be without things?
Without a light bulb.
Yeah, insane. So a couple of questions for you. So how would the world change if right now, like a comet comes real close to Earth, doesn't actually hit us, but enough momentum is imparted on Earth somehow that Earth spins twice as fast. So we go through six hours of daylight, roughly 6 hours a night, 6 hour days. What do you think would change in the world in that sort of scenario? Would it just be people go to sleep every sort of like, every night time that comes, and so we'd sort of get 4 hours of sleep in the first night and then 4 hours in the second night? Or do you think would change to some sort of have we call it like the first half of the day and then part of the next, and then you end up sleeping in part of the second day?
Be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it would fall in like you're saying, like almost a siesta midday kind of thing, and then continue on with your second part of the day, or whether we would go down the path of just ensuring there's enough light during the middle period of the day, so there's just like light everywhere that it feels like it is sunlight almost.
Yeah.
So
because there's weird stuff going on now, I guess, because how many people have jobs that are connected to America, for example. And now with Zoom and the advent of technology, you do need to be up at 10 p.m. to deliver that really important thing the next day, because it's the next day is at 2 a.m. for the people, so you got to get it done. So I would, if I had to hazard a guess, I would say right now is probably the most broken up sleep patterns like worldwide that there has ever been. There's probably people doing all sorts of night shift sort of work that they never used to be able to do.
All
definitely.
sorts of agree.
Yeah, great, lots of different stuff going on. So that
Philippine call centers, mate, they work at nighttime.
Yeah,
for them, they complete. I think mostly in Manila and a couple of other places, they basically live just on shifted time. So all of them, because they try to align with the US or Australia or Europe, they basically begin the days at like 7 p.m. and finish at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
And it's like the traffic is like normal. There's traffic, like there's peak traffic at 7:30 p.m. for people going to the office and stuff.
Yeah.
So,
Wow. If you had the ability to lock in an 8 out of 10 sleep, so you woke up and you're feeling 8 out of 10 fresh, but it requires 6 months of consistent, like 6.5, 7 hours sleep, and you can't miss it, what do you think you'd end up trying to get into that pattern?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it'd be worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah. For 8 out of 10, 8 out of 10 is like really good, man. 8 out of 10 is
And
really
if you
good.
miss one night, it goes back to 0 again. And you have to.
Well, of course you do it, man. Because what's the negative out of it? Because there's no negative.
Well, yeah, the negative is you're probably not going to be able to go out for, a wild party night. And if you do, you're going to have to make absolutely sure that the next day you
Sure,
don't
but if you do, it just restarts again. And then you just go for it
Yeah,
again.
but then it's like another 6
you're not
months.
gonna like get that confirmed 8 out of 10 ever. So if you go partying, it's like, okay, well, I'll restart again.
Yeah, I just means like you'd have there'd be a drawback to that. You'd realize you'd have a long time out of 8 out of 10, and then you'd go, oh wow, shit, I've got 6 months of shit sleep now.
No.
Because
No.
that's it.
No.
If you could live a whole life without sleep, would you do it? So no, sleep is not required, but you've only got 50 years of living on this life, on this earth. Because I think this would get into your love of just action and continually doing
I
things.
think I would take that.
Yeah.
Just the extra amount of hours just to do whatever you needed to do. Yes.
Yeah. So it's not
Sure.
extra hours, it's just not broken up in essence.
Yeah.
So you still get the same
Like you get
amount.
like 80 years with sleeping or like directly 50 hours and you just
50 years,
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
much, yeah.
yeah, no, definitely. I think the throwaway sleep, if it's not required, yeah.
But so I guess, one of the bad things with that would be you'd see less change in your lifetime. So imagine if you were born in, 1950, you'd live to 2000. But if you'd chosen the other one, you'd live to 2030, and then you'd get to see, holy shit,
Yeah,
this
a
is
lot
what
of
the
things.
internet actually did.
Yeah.
So you'd get to see more stuff just in a
That
lifetime.
is true. That's a good point. That's a good point.
All right, I'll finish off with my mere mortal moment. A good sleep is a battle to be won. Treat it as such. So I thought you might like this. So your bed is the terrain.
Oh, hey, here we go.
The fans and the lights are your weapons.
Yeah.
They things that you can use, but also can be used against you by your enemies. And so what's the enemy? Disturbances, street lights, noises, blinking red lights in your room. But you know what the real enemy is? It's your own mind, just like war. So if you're having a bad night, I think...
Karen's building up the campaign here.
Yeah, I think, what's Sam Harris has put it really succinctly. What's one of the worst things that you can have? It's when you're trying to get to sleep and you can't get to sleep. You want consciousness to end. You want it to just switch off, but you can't. And it's not the physical sensation, because the physical sensation of just like lying down, it's not so bad, unless you're like me and who compared it to being like a Navy SEAL. But back in, I would say like, that's the worst thing. Like the real enemy when you're trying to get to sleep is your own mind. And
I'll say, yeah, I agree. And I've got to say though, one surefire way to ensure that does not happen is like if you have a day where you're not exerting, like getting up to that 70, 80%, not 100%, so you shouldn't be doing that every day, but not like 70 to 80% of effectiveness that you could be doing. Like if you're just chilling out doing nothing and then you go to bed and you're like, oh, I'm still thinking, or you have a lot of things in your brain. Yeah, I'd be like, man, just push yourself hard to get to the point that you go to sleep. You're like, man, just can't wait to like fall asleep.
Okay.
I am done.
your strategy.
Although there is some people who, just can't get sleep anyways, regardless of that. So
yeah,
there is that deficiency.
I think I've sort of gotten into the pattern of being more in the latter camp. Like I can have a real casual day, and even if I go to bed with an active mind, I think I've mostly got it down pat. I'll just be able to switch it off one way or another.
Well, okay, let's finish it this way for some value for the listeners. What would you say that would be your optimal way to sleep? Like, what is if you had to line up a couple of things, what would you say? Yep, this would make for optimal sleep for me.
Leg above my heart.
Ah, there you go. Yeah.
Obviously, I would say in my own bedroom with no lights, a little bit of a breeze coming in, maybe I don't mind a fan just having some white noise in the background and no other person there. Or if there is, there's a bloody...
There's a space, there's a pillow in the way.
You're not coming between me.
Yeah.
Oh, and I have to have, one arm raised.
Yes.
Yeah,
you have to do that. Yeah, I think for me, to add on top of that, it'd be specifically 18 degrees.
Ooh,
like
okay.
optimal temperature. Magnesium just beforehand as well. I wouldn't go the melatonin route just because you're adding exogenous melatonin when your body can do it. If your body can do it, let it do its own thing. And also do not disturb on the phone for me. So obviously you do that all the time anyways. Yeah. But for me, do not disturb between times like 20 minutes before I go to bed. Yeah. And optimal, I'm just not even looking at my phone for a while.
Probably like half an hour, 20 minutes.
So trying to go away from that blue light essentially. So blue light's actually a good thing when you're awake. It's just not so much when you're trying to sleep because the receptors in your eyes, can't really tell the fact that you're trying to go to bed and it releases those chemicals. So folks, that has been the Mere Mortals today on sleeping. If you want to catch us not sleeping and actually being active, chatting, talking, and finding out about the last 150 episodes plus everything else, go check out the YouTube. Go check out the Instagram, Mere Mortals Podcast. Go check us out everywhere. We've got some changes coming as well. We're thinking about it. The next few months. We always say this. There's always, I'm gonna stop saying that because there's always changes, which is good. So, folks,
but we'll keep you notified as well. There's if it's big changes. When there's a schedule change coming up, and we'll just have to time it nicely because these come out probably. Oh, no, it doesn't matter because it'll be afterwards. So
you'll know about it.
You're smart people. You're Mere Mortals.
Mere Mortals. You're good out there, folks. That's it. One out.
Current out.
Hi.